order the Des Moines Park and Recreation meeting for October the 23rd, and it's a beautiful day outside, 2018. So, Rebecca, would you please call the roll?
Davis.
Here.
Ogle.
Here.
Acto.
Here.
Bogus.
Here.
Nassif.
Here.
Potter.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Woodard.
Here.
Vilmain.
Here.
Lohmeyer.
Here.
Hugh.
Here.
Banter.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Now, before we start, I'm going to recommend an adjustment on the agenda because we're trying to meet time frames with the mayor that is going to be here for our presentation. So, Ben, would you like to explain the adjustments that we're going to have?
So we have two guests, both have some other arrangements tonight, so I hope you would entertain this. First, we have the mayor walking in here in a second. I see him now, right on time. And we have our guest Archie from the Cemetery Tours, Archie Cook. So we'd like to go with Live Des Moines first, and then under the director's report, go into the Cemetery Tours, if that's okay. After that, we can start back at the top and work our way down.
Okay, so we're going to do Live Des Moines first, and then the mayor will have some comments on that, and he is, like Ben said, he has another meeting to get to, so can we have a motion for the amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, why don't we start right now then?
All right, Richard Brown has been our quarterback, and he's done just a tremendous job with this large project. As we talked about as a board, this is a project that you may get to do as a staff person once in your career. These plans are meant to be at least 20 years and to guide the direction. So you're also on the park board at the right time to set the next 20 years. We are again interested in your thoughts, comments, as this process will make its way through not just this board, but planning and zoning here right behind you. And then the month of December, if all goes as planned, we will be meeting in front of the city council, and the mayor and his colleagues will look at this and they'll be asked to adopt our plan. With no further ado, I'll let Richard walk you through a summary of what this plan is about to propose.
Chair Davis, members of the Parks and Recreation Board, Richard Brown, Assistant Director. Like Ben said, I'm very pleased tonight to be here to give you your first overview of what we consider the kind of final plan for Live DSM. This is our once-in-a-generation opportunity to really chart a new vision for what we believe Parks and Recreation will be in Des Moines over the next 20 years, and very excited to give you an overview. Obviously, you received, as part of your Park Board packet, a link to download the plan. I have one paper copy here if you need to pass it around while I'm talking, but about 236 pages, so we'll be here a little bit for a while tonight, so hopefully you're ready to go. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to do a quick overview of what are some of the high points in here and give you an opportunity to then go through it over the next month. Should you have any questions coming up at our next meeting before we ask you to make a recommendation on this, we'll be happy to take any of those questions. And between now and then, we'll also have an executive summary that really summarizes the key points of the plan as well. We'll get that to you before the next your next meeting as well.
As Richard begins, just a reminder, we did not print this for the reason of we don't know if you have comments. We won't even print it for the next meeting unless somebody really needs a special copy. We'll print it for you on case by case if you need one. But the plan would be is to make it all the way to the city council, get it adopted, then we would print official copies and make sure all board members and council members all have a final copy with hopefully at that point everybody's input.
All right. So we have a few new members of the Parks and Recreation Board since we first began this process. We wanted to just take one quick step back and say, why was this plan a priority? So a few years ago, the City Council approved a new comprehensive plan for the City of Des Moines. It was called Plan DSM. So you can kind of see how Live DSM kind of falls in that naming nomenclature for this plan as well. And part of that was really to talk about the importance of the parks and open space system, the trails, the programming that happens to the quality of life and the livability in the city of Des Moines. And one of the specific goals called out in that plan was to prioritize and fund an update of the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. So that was really kind of one of the first starting points where we are to get to where we are today. Next, this was also called out in Guide DSM, which is really the City Council strategic plan and how they're prioritizing what the city staff works on and what we work to improve in the city of Des Moines. And this document, again, taken from that DSM naming convention, is Guide DSM. So in 2015, 2016, you can kind of see here under the top priority, the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan was one of those really top priorities for the entire city to begin working on. So again, kind of walking through how the importance of this before we actually started it. And then also, where did we come from? What was our previous comprehensive plan? This is a document that was adopted by the City Council in 1995. It was called Parklands, a celebration of Des Moines community spirit. It was really a shared vision for the community on what the park system is today and what they wanted it to become today. And it was a plan for the entire community. Just a few things that were talked about in there. They talked about taking what was a formal gravel pit and really a rundown park just off of Fleur Drive and turning it into a crown jewel of a park. And today we have Grays Lake as a result of that. Another big thing that was really a foresight there was the evolution of our trail system. They really called for, in this plan, an expansive trail system that could link all areas of the community. And you can see since that time how much our trail system has developed and really links most areas of our community. And finally, another big thing that was talked about was really enhancing and redeveloping our riverfront to be a place that we didn't really push people away from like we've done in the past, but really invite people there. And you can see through all the work that's been done, the Principal River Walk and all the efforts along the river in downtown Des Moines have really made a difference. And those were big vision ideas that were talked about in that plan. So as we wanted to start to develop this plan, we really had to go out and see what the public thought of what parks look like today and what they wanted to see it look like in the future and what might that vision be. So we are able to make over 2,000 public contacts with people that live in the city, that use our facilities, or have registered for some of our programs. We did this through online questionnaires, we did stakeholder workshops, we held public open houses. We did almost 50 neighborhood association meetings where members of our team went out, sat down, and really asked members of that neighborhood what's important to them in their neighborhood, what would they like to see improved, and what would they make their parks look like in the future. We also hosted community discussions such as the Racial Equity Institute workshop, as well as a public forum that night to really talk about how race impacts Parks and Recreation. We had 2 great steering committees, one made up of members of the community. Chairman Davis served on that committee and really did a lot of great work with us to help us get this plan put together. We also had a steering committee of different staff members from different departments. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing really gelled with what's going on in a lot of other departments across the city. And then finally, we sat down with all of your subcommittees to make sure that we were hitting all the right points and make sure that we know what each individual subcommittee thought would be the future of Parks and Recreation. With that, we were able to come to a lot of really great information that's in this plan, but here's just a couple of infographics that show, and this may be a little bit hard to read with the colors, but really some driving themes that they saw here. The first kind of line going down is things they saw that should be improved. Anything from neighborhood parks to customer service to water quality, things that people saw out and really were aggregated across all the input that we got. And then the next 2 kind of lines are things people wanted to see more of. And you can see here anything for more resources for parks, to more natural lands, to restrooms, to urban open space and shelters. So a lot of different things that people thought would be important to have more of in the future in Des Moines. Then also here just a little bit of additional information about challenges, strengths, why do people use our facilities if they do use them, and kind of how they would prioritize what they would spend money on in the future here. And one of the things we always see is trails are very popular and continue to be very popular, and a recognition from the community that, you know, they would love to have more of things if more resources were available. After taking all that public input and working with our steering committees, really come up with a 20-year vision for what Parks and Recreation looks like in the future here. And I won't read through all these, but a lot of the themes that we saw were really providing equitable facilities and programming across the community, a need to address wellness and health, and understanding how parks and trails really are the heart of what we have in Des Moines and are really important to the people that live here and the people that visit Des Moines. Also understanding that technology can be valuable in how we let people know what facilities are out there, what programs could be done, and utilizing that because, you know, 10 years ago, no one had a smartphone. Now today, everyone has a smartphone. So how can we capitalize on that and get people out in our parks and learning and really enjoying the public spaces that we have in Des Moines? Then also making sure that our operation maintenance needs are in sync with what we have for funding. And there's always a concern that, you know, with all the facilities we have across the city, do we have enough operational needs to maintain that all? And then finally, one of the biggest themes, and you'll see that throughout here, is really felt like neighborhood parks are the heart of the system. While people use trails a lot, the most important thing that a lot of people said is that park that's close to my house is the most important thing to me because it's the park I use the most. And if they didn't have a park near their house, they wanted one near their house because they really felt like that was an opportunity for them with limited amounts of time to get out, enjoy nature, and not have to drive all the way across town. We also talked about mission and really did we need to reinvent the wheel? Is there a new mission statement that was needed? And after all the work we went into this, really felt like the previous mission statement we had, which we've talked a lot about, but helping Des Moines live well, play hard, and protect the earth was really still the most appropriate mission statement. So we're sticking with that, or that at least be our recommendation that we stick with that moving forward. Also, what was important to us moving forward in a new vision for Parks and Recreation was to benchmark ourselves against our peers and cities that we wanted to be. So we spent quite a bit of time with our steering committees talking about what are cities that we would really consider our peer cities, people that if we asked, how do you match up to this city? Who would they be? So we determined through that process that Madison, Wisconsin, Omaha, Nebraska, and St. Paul, Minnesota were really probably the 3 cities that made the most sense to be our peer cities when we're looking at benchmarking. Reason for that were a couple of things. State capitals, as well as being in the Midwest and being the largest city. So Omaha is the largest city in the state of Nebraska. Madison and St. Paul are both the capital of their states. So really felt that they were good comparisons to who we are in Des Moines being the largest city in Iowa as well as the state capital. Then we wanted to look at who has really top-notch park and recreation systems that we could compare ourselves to or if we were striving to be moving forward. So we came up with Minneapolis, Minnesota, Denver, Colorado, and Austin, Texas. Just to give you a comparison, both St. Paul and Minneapolis have been ranked as the 1 and 2 best park and recreation systems in the country for the last 5 years by the Trust for Public Land. So just right in our backyard here, we have some really great examples of both being peers and aspirational cities to look towards. Some of the key findings of the benchmarking when they looked at those systems versus our systems, Des Moines, on average, has a lower operating budget than both our peer and aspirational cities. Obviously, they're different sizes, but when you compare that out based on the amount of people that live in the community, we're lower than average. We also found that Des Moines serves nearly 3 times as many people that use our system per full-time employee than any of the other cities combined. So you take any of those 6 cities and we serve 3 times as many people with the staff that we have here. So we're able to get a lot done with the limited amount of staffing that we have. And then finally, kind of looking at where can you go or how can you get to where some of these aspirational cities are, they found that they are all certified by the National Recreation and Parks Association as CAPRA. So what CAPRA is a set of 108 standards that the National Recreation Association, NRPA, has said are important to have a professionally managed Parks and Recreation agency. So they have all certified and become up to that standard. So it's maybe something we want to look at in the future as we work to be one of those aspirational cities. Finally, what we're able to do from that is create 5 goals that really chart where we think Parks and Recreation needs to go in the future here in Des Moines. The first one of those is equity, and what we mean by that is delivering equitable services and facilities. That can mean a lot of different things, but what we want to try to do here is give you a flavor for what an approach would be, or maybe some things that would come about from when we talk about delivering equitable services and facilities. So here's a couple of things. One, we want to better define the term parks. And what do we mean by that? Well, park can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. People that ride their bikes on the trails might consider those parks. People that are new to our community that have immigrated from different countries might have a different definition for what a park or public space is. So what we want to do is continue to work with the people that live here and really define what do parks mean to people, because maybe they're different than what we consider parks today. And as we evolve and we move forward as a community, that vision might include looking at spaces in a different manner. We also want to continue the dialogue on equity in Parks and Recreation. We had a really great workshop and evening open house where we invited people to come talk about the role racial equity has in Parks and Recreation. And so one of the things that came out of that was that people really thought that was a good event, but they want us to see us continue that dialogue so that we can continue to talk about and make sure that we're keeping an eye on those things as we look at future parks or programming. Another one was potentially looking at establishing a program called Parks for New Des Moines Residents. And really what this could be is new people come to town, either from other parts of the country or other parts of the world. Maybe there's an opportunity to work with them to put together programming that really suits the needs and fits how they live their life and how they use public spaces. So really taking a different look at all the new people that are coming here, and can we provide public spaces and programming that really fits their needs. Additionally, one of the things we want to be able to do is we want to measure how much progress we're making towards this. So just kind of a few approaches here. One, we would probably want to establish a baseline for how are we equitably serving people with facilities and programs today. We want to be able to measure that progress, and then we want to be able to develop and adopt policies regarding equity that helps us move towards that goal longer term. This map's a little bit hard to read, but I wanted to kind of put it in here to illustrate. One of the things we asked the consultant to do is really take a few metrics that could be measured and develop at least an idea on maybe where are some of the high equity needs in our community. And so what they took here is areas of high minority populations, areas of low income, areas of high health needs. So a lot of people have been identified by CDC statistics as maybe obese or have some other health issues, and crime, and combine those all together to really come up with maybe a potential priority for areas of high equity need. And so you can see here, it's a little bit hard to see, but then you took all that together and you circled some areas on the map. What we can start to do is then quantify that and help us make better informed decisions and recommendations to you and the City Council. The second goal we're calling attraction. So we're looking at programs that attract people to parks. A few approaches we're looking at here that can give you a flavor of this is we want to begin a dialogue about unmet recreation needs. Again, are we missing some programs out there that are potentially would be very valuable to people that live in our community? Or is there something that maybe people would really like to see that we just haven't undertaken yet? Are there groups of people that we haven't hit from a standpoint of programming? Second one is taking and starting a community activities guide sent out at least once per year to all Des Moines households. One of the things we've been doing, very city source in every year, is putting some of our activities out there ahead of the seasons. But can we take that another step and really publish a year-round activities guide that goes out separate of city source, that goes to every household in the city of Des Moines? And finally here, winter season programming was something that we heard a ton. And I think kind of caught us by surprise, but people wanted opportunities to get outside of April through October. Are there ways to embrace the colder weather? Regardless if our climate is changing or not, it gets cold in the winter. So if we have snow, are there activities we do? If we don't have snow, is there other activities we can program and get people out there? So really looking at year-round programming throughout the entire system. A couple other potential options related to this. Maybe there's the ability to establish a recreation committee that is a formal subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Board to understand the recreation needs of the community. We have a Trails and Greenways, we have an Urban Conservation, we have a Cemetery Advisory Committee. All of these subcommittees help you to make recommendations on areas of specific needs within the Parks and Recreation system. Potentially a recreation committee might be a next step to that. Also looking at a series of guidelines and policies that standardizes fees and evaluation tools for programming. So based on what we want to accomplish with a program, we can make better recommendations to you, the Parks and Recreation Board, on fees and what we charge to people in our programs. Another one that we've been starting to work on, but was very popular as what the consultant heard, was starting a pop-up programming initiative to deliver programs where the system has gaps. This would be potential to take out some sort of mobile recreational opportunity and just set it up for the day or the night or a couple hours to get people engaged in our community and recreation programming that doesn't necessarily have a park today. It would be a great way that we can get out, have some fun, getting people engaged in their community, and we can take that back at the end of the night, or we can do that a few nights in a row. It's really a really flexible opportunity for us to get out into the community more. Next is heart. We want to make sure that parks and trails are the heart of the community. And what do we mean by that? What they really talked about as being very important here, and this is a standard that's becoming a nationwide standard, but we want to ensure that all citizens are within a safe 10-minute walk to a high-quality park or trail. What do we mean by that? So wherever you live in the city of Des Moines, from the street grid that you live on, you could get to a park or trail within a 10-minute walk. Just to give you a reference, that's about a half a mile for the average person. So to give you a feel for how far you'd have to go. As part of that, we really need to understand our system and where we might have gaps. This could be gaps where we're missing parks and trail connections. There might be a park that's fairly close to your house, but there's just no connection to get there. Are there areas in need of enhancement? Do we have a park, but it's not the most high quality? Maybe it needs new playground equipment. Are there things we can do to enhance that park to make it a more high quality park for people that live there? And then finally, areas that need activation. Are there areas and parks that are really probably pretty nice, but a lot of people don't go there because they don't really have a reason to? So can we look at programming opportunities to really engage people and get them to come out to their park? And that might create some sort of sustainable activity within that park. This map on the right just shows you what the big gap areas we have in the city of Des Moines. So you can see the south side has a pretty large gap, the north side has a gap, and then kind of the west side has a gap. And there's obviously little smaller areas once you get down into the nitty gritty, but those are really big gap areas. Now, one thing I do want to note on gaps, that doesn't count public school grounds unless we have an agreement with the Des Moines Public School District. We do have a couple agreements, one at Brody School Park, so that's considered a public park because we have an agreement. We also have an agreement for the tennis courts and walking trail up at the Huber and Meredith complex up there. So those count as public parks for this analysis. So there's a lot of opportunities out there that we can probably fill in some of these gaps pretty quickly to ensure public access to parks all over the community. Also, like we talked about earlier, neighborhood parks really are the heart of the system. Almost everyone we talked to said that, pushed us to be the importance of that. We've talked about our entire city. We've talked about the regional parks, the Grays Lakes of the world, the soccer complexes, the baseball and softball complexes, but really felt like the neighborhood park is where people want to go and go most of their time. Also talking about consistently providing a sense of safety and security. This talks about programming, lighting, and patrol, working with the police department, and then prioritizing areas where equity needs are the highest. If we have limited dollars, maybe we take the equity scores that we put together working with you and prioritize those areas for limited funding if we have limited funding. Goal 4 is improving our natural systems. So this is the nature goal. Talking about an approach to this is really describing what a healthy, resilient natural system in Des Moines parks and what they are, what's the benefit to the city of Des Moines, the people that live here. Parks and natural areas are more than just recreation space. They're green infrastructure. They're opportunities for people to improve their health. So looking at nature and how it fits into the overall system, one of the things talked about is creating a system-wide natural resource management plan that looks at priorities for improvement, repair, restoration, both on the land and in the water. Talking about monitoring and reporting, one of the things that we started to engage this year is we joined into a program with Polk County Conservation where we're testing water quality across the park system. I believe it's about 20 sites that we're measuring. So we can bring back monitoring and results on what our water quality looks like across the entire system. And then how do we use volunteers and other resources throughout the system to improve our natural resources? Another one is educating people to understand and engage with nature in our parks without harming the wildlife or sensitive natural features. How do we get people out there? How do we get them to understand the value of that and really engage in that without it being too damaging to the natural resource itself? And our 5th goal is what we're considering innovation. How do we launch these new approaches to parks and recreation services across the city? One of the things that Ben's talked a lot about over the years, and you've all been very, very a huge part of that success, is helping us find partnerships that stretch the limited city dollars we have. That has been so key to our success as a park and recreation system and the programs that we provide. How do we continue to expand that, engage more people in what we do, and providing the best possible facilities and services? How do we take and leverage best practices from other park systems across the country? One of the great things is we have thousands and thousands of other agencies that we can steal all their best ideas from. So rather than reinventing the wheel, how do we steal their best ideas, bring it back here, and adapt it to our community? So continue to leverage that and find the best possible things to bring back here. And then finally, putting together and evaluating existing processes and decision-making criteria so that we don't have a major problem if something's not working. We're okay giving it up and moving on to something else because we've had sound criteria in how we evaluated it and how we considered it providing that service or facility. Also, one of the things we want to do is continue to maintain a culture of creativity and innovation. Make sure that we're out there always looking what the possibilities are, working with the people that use our parks and our facilities, and get out there and make sure that we continue to provide the best services and facilities. Continue and establish additional data-driven analytical processes, methods, and tools that help us make the best possible recommendations to you as a board and the City Council. And then finally, we want to continue to work with those benchmarking that we established at the very front to continue to ensure that we're making successful strides towards becoming a better Parks and Recreation agency. And finally, when we talk about a plan being 20 years, it can be very daunting to think, how do we accomplish all that over the next 20 years, or where do we even start? So one of the things that we asked the consultant team to do was put together a short chapter at the very end, and you'll see that there, but recommendations on where we start to ensure that we get off to a quick start and can be successful in the long term on this. So they make some recommendations to us that relate to policies to bring forward to you, projects to consider, processes to look at, additional partnerships to reach out to, and potential standards for what we want to accomplish moving forward. So a whole series of those to make sure that we get off to the right start here the next 2 to 5 years. And finally, just wanted to bring this forward to you, but this will be the 4th time that we've kind of talked about LiveDSM. This started all the way back in the director's report in June of 2017, and it's worked its way up till now. So we appreciate you taking the time every time we've asked you questions to look through this and provide us feedback. We think we've got a really solid plan that really represents what we want to be as a community and where we want Parks and Recreation Services to go. So where we plan to go from here on out is we will ask the Plan and Zoning Commission. I apologize, I kind of switched these two, but Plan and Zoning Commission will be asked on November 15th to adopt LiveDSM as part of part of Plan DSM, the city's comprehensive plan. If they did that, that recommendation would go forward to City Council. We'll ask you to do the same thing at your November 27th meeting. On the morning of December 10th, we will be giving a similar presentation to the City Council in a workshop setting down at City Hall, I believe it will be. And then the following week, City Council will be asked to adopt this plan as well as part of Plan DSM and be a component of the city's comprehensive plan. So we're very excited about getting to this point and all the continued input we're going to get until we get all the way up to December 17th. And with that, I'm just going to leave you a quote from Mayor County that something that came up when we were going through this process. And after you digest that, I'll ask the mayor to come up and make a few remarks. Thank you.
Well, I look at this and I think, Richard, you skimmed through 233 pages really quickly. But I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment to Parks and Recreation, to the city of Des Moines, and being a part of envisioning a future for all of our citizens. And as was pointed out by Richard, and Ben and I talk frequently about what we're doing and where we're going as we think about a comprehensive plan for the city and how the parks fits into that as we envision the next foreseeable future, next 20, 40 years. And how do we plan for that? What do we think Des Moines should be, and how should we reach out to everybody, not just some of the people, but all the people, and get their input on what Des Moines looks like. And I know that we've got a lot of partners, and I see Heather sitting over here, and we've reached out numerous times to the school board, and I know that in a number of ways the school district has partnered with us. And I even think, by the way, of Waveland Tennis Courts, which wasn't mentioned, but there's a park facility that Des Moines Public Schools uses for students to either competitively or otherwise play tennis and participate in that and learn, a number of things. And that's another one of the ways, and some of the ways that we participate and think about it. And as we think about what all the needs are of all of our citizens, and I think about citizen outreach, and I think about North High School, where I'm going after I leave here, as we think about some other aspects of our city and some of the things that happen, and the importance of a swimming pool. and what that means to the future. Now, the Parks Department maintains a lot of water facilities. We teach people to swim and make that a requirement so that we don't have unfortunate things happen in some of our other park facilities, that people know how to swim. We've got a very diverse population. It is, and we have to serve everybody. When I hear from Heather and others that we're speaking nearly 100 languages and dialects in our Des Moines public schools, and know that an awful lot of these people, they come from different countries from around the world, and I understand, Heather, like 70 different countries or something like that is countries of origin. A lot of these kids don't know how to swim, and you know, they feel they can approach any body of water and just walk in, and I think it's our opportunity, A, to have great facilities, but partnering with other parts of our community so that we keep everybody safe, whether it's Des Moines Police or it's Des Moines Public Schools or it's fire or it's Polk County or it's public health. I mean, these are all things that we have to think about, and these are all our partners. And as I was making a couple notes and thinking about it and thinking about by the way, you know, we're talking about looking at other park systems around the country and you know, let's steal all their best ideas. I'm all about that, but I don't like the word steal so much. I think let's call it legitimate larceny. And I think that those are and I invite them to steal our good ideas too, because I think that as we share and we think about the future and we think about all the people that we serve and all the responsibilities that we have to serve the citizens of the city of Des Moines, it's input that we get either from neighborhood meetings or at the park board meetings or at plan and zoning committee meetings, and to listen to what our citizens want and what they need. And I think you guys have done a great job in this process in reaching out and getting that input. And now let's do our best to implement it and do what we can, and know that we have to leverage, you know, all of that for all of our citizens, not just some of our citizens. Everybody deserves an opportunity, no matter where they live, what their circumstances are. And I think that we're doing a great job of doing that, and that whole idea of making a trailhead or a trail or a park available within 10 minutes walking from wherever they live, whatever their circumstance, I think is a great goal. And let's see what we can do. And we didn't talk about community gardens, or we didn't talk about some of those other things, but those are going to be such important pieces of the future. And again, back to schools, hopefully we can teach kids how to raise food, how to prepare food, how to can food, how to do what they can in healthy ways, and maybe they can sneak it home and have legitimate larceny and take it home and say, Mom, Dad, we ought to be eating like this. This is what we should be doing. And I think it's an opportunity for our Parks Department and our community gardens and everything that we do to share our best ideas and practices with all of our citizens. So thank you for everything you guys do, and keep up the great work. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and we realize that you have another meeting to attend, so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for all the time you spent on the plan with us, too.
I probably want to go to the cemetery tour.
Would you like a motion?
Well, I would like to ask you guys, too, as just for staff direction. We realize that trying to consume 237 pages of a comprehensive plan is difficult to do in 30 minutes, as we've just done. Is there any tips or any requests before now? I'm thinking the next board meeting will have this on there, obviously, for board action, but do you want to have another review of the presentation? Is there anything we could do better to help you?
Well, are you going to send us a PDF of the full, can you send us a PDF of the full comprehensive plan, or?
Yeah, it was sent, and there's a website. Well, it should be in the last email, but we'll double check that. LiveDSM is the website. We'll get it to you.
There was a link to
Yep,
it.
there's a
And
link.
it's very good. I spent some time going over it this past weekend and weekend. It's very good. If you have time, you don't have to read every word.
No.
Just, there's a lot of it that we know because we spend so much time with it. But the information is just incredible, and narrowing it to these 5 items, I don't know how you were able to do it, but fantastic job, because I think you really nailed it with the five needs. So, yeah, I'd encourage everybody, just flip through and we'll be green and not print them all out. I agree.
And one of the things is we don't want to print it out until we get through planning and zoning, this board, and actually even the city council. So we're going to use that website unless there's people that like to have a hard copy. We'll make that available if needed, but we're trying to limit that because there could be edits. Last but not least is when you go out as a board member, I would tell you that I have to go and present this, and that sometimes I only get one statement. And if you boil it down to one statement, what I would tell you this plan says in one statement, which is hard to do, is you've done a wonderful job in the last 2 decades building the regional facilities. Think the Grays Lake, think the trails, think your sports complexes, think Sculpture Park. It says continue to resource those and maintain those, but turn your attention to your priorities to the neighborhoods and equal access and equity. That's what this plan says. And it's hard to boil it down again, 200 plus pages to that, but that's what this plan is asking you to do, is focus on your neighborhoods, focus on those neighborhood connections. And I think that's what we've all been saying for a couple of years, so it's great to hear that your advice is actually with the community advice. It matches up and it mirrors itself nicely.
I think we've been informed as they've moved along with each process of this, or each chapter basically, and they've kept us all informed, and I think, Ben, your staff has done a great job on keeping us as individuals and as a board informed, so we appreciate it. Anything else? Kimberly, you had a motion?
I make a motion to receive and file the LIB DSM.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, receive and file. Okay, the next part, are we going to go to board action? I thought we were going to cemetery tours.
Thank you for your flexibility again, because we have a guest here. So from our cemetery operations is Ganesh Gampat. He's going to give you a little overview. These have become very popular.
Good afternoon, Chair Davis and members of the Parks and Recreation Board of Directors. Ganesh Gampat, Parks and Rec Supervisor, Cemetery Manager. For over 22 years, we've had 2 volunteers who have given tours of the historic Woodland Cemetery. Gerald LeBlanc, who many of you know or have heard of, has given tours to over 6,000 individuals. Gerald was a history teacher at North High School. He also studied a lot of Des Moines history and a lot of cemetery history when he started doing this. Gerald, because of his ill health, has stepped back. He's still doing well. He's living at Valley View Village. But Archie Cook stepped up in 2013 and started giving the tours of Woodland Cemetery. And a lot of this, a lot of the work that Archie's put into this is based on watching Gerald do this over many years. So the purpose of these tours have been to promote the remarkable history and past achievements of the men and women who helped to shape our community. These tours promote civic pride, give us the background stories of the individuals that have been named, or their names have been used in parks, on streets, and in buildings here in the community. And mostly, as these tours are done, they also talk about the military service of the individuals who have contributed in significant ways and given the ultimate sacrifice for their city, the state, and the country. Tours are done April through October, typically on Saturdays. There are about 2.5-hour public tours that are done. There is a number of other tours that are also done. They're customized based on the individuals or the group's desire to either limit on time or focus in a specific areas. Tour ranges from about 25 to 80 individuals. Typically about 350 people participate. They learn about this through either word of mouth, social media, or they get private invitations to attend one of the tours. And what makes it engaging is Archie really reaches out to people, connects with them. There's question and answer periods. A lot of people have they might see their a name on a headstone and say, well, who is that? So he's able to answer many of those questions because of the research that is done. Now, we don't charge for these tours. They are free, but we do ask for contributions, and we get about $1,500 to $3,500 a year for that are reserved and restricted for the Woodland Cemetery restoration. So I want to introduce Archie Cook to you all. Archie has lived in Des Moines all of his life. He's been married for 40 years. He is a former history teacher, retired in 2015, taught at North High School. He earned a degree from DMAC and then went on to Grandview College and studied history and education. His family is here. He's been married for 40 plus years, 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Archie is sitting right back here. And some of you know him. We went through and polled the room, and he actually knows most of your names, by the way, and probably your family history. But if you haven't had an opportunity to attend one of these tours, we just concluded this year, so please plan on it next year in 2019. In March, he and Jen Fletcher and Callie and I will get together. We'll plot out the year about the number of tours. But Archie, thank you for what you do. 100% of your time is volunteer, and we're grateful for your efforts. Thank you.
I just want to echo Ganesh's support of Archie. Archie's a wonderful person, and he does this for free as a volunteer. And I continue every year that I work here in the last few years that he's done this. People keep saying, can we do more of these, Ben? And I say, we have to ask Archie. He's the one giving us all the time, and he's done all the research. So thank you, and thanks for helping us put a positive light on our cemetery operations.
Come on up, Arch, yes.
I still sub every day for the Des Moines district, usually up in East High, my alma mater. We were doing World War I, and there's no fitting people to talk to about city parks than World War I. Because I was reminded last Saturday when we did the last tour that many of our city parks are not only named for people buried in Woodland Cemetery. I think of the Ewing Park. I think of Redhead Park on the east side. Don't tell anybody on the east side. I almost stumbled on that name, or they won't let me back. But anyway, I would just like to remind everybody that there are many city parks. I can think of at least 3. We have the Gold Star section in Woodland Cemetery, and it's almost the 100th anniversary of the ending of World War I. And the 44 men that we have buried in the Gold Star section of Woodland Cemetery, they were actually buried for 3 to 5 years in France. And that big, nice Gold Star monument that's on University by Lutheran Hospital, originally intended for Woodland Cemetery, but the community did such a great job of raising money for that monument that they would have had to leave 3 of the soldiers unburied if they put it down in Woodland. And so the little park across the street, the point I was trying to make is the little park across the street on University is Burke Park, and John Burke is one of those World War I soldiers. We also have a Medal of Honor recipient that hardly anybody in the community, until I started taking North High kids down there with Gerald LeBlanc, we have a Medal of Honor recipient in Woodland Cemetery that's buried with those 44 men. His name's Lieutenant Colonel Emery Pike. And so we also have McHenry Park is one of those 44 men. And so I think your predecessors and everything that we do with tying the parks and the cemetery together are just such a fantastic way that I can lead people on a history tour and plus promote our parks too. So thank you for that, and thank you for allowing me to take over for Gerald. I know that ran through the city council, I think, but anyway, I'm used to being outdoors and doing tours to doing history tours, so I'm trying to do this all by memory. But thank you so much for all that you guys do.
Archie, thank you for all you do, and I'll tell you what. Great amount of feedback on your tours and how interesting they are, and how you just get lost in your speeches, and it's tremendous. You've entertained many over the years. Thank you.
And
Yeah, I've
I don't mean to
taken
be
the
rude,
tours.
but my 87-year-old father fell 2.5 weeks ago doing his garden like he wasn't supposed to do and broke his right arm, two bones above the shoulder, below the shoulder. So I'm going to go take him dinner.
Thank you. Thank you, Archie.
Very much
Thank
for
you.
coming, sir.
Okay, we are going to go back to our original
Is that his
agenda.
jacket? Did somebody use that?
Archie, did he forget his jacket?
Good catch. Here he comes.
Nice.
Comes.
And we have a $10 bid on the jacket. Okay, let's go back to the original agenda now, and did we get a chance to look through the minutes of the September 18th? If so,
I'll
motion?
make a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Let's go to board action, and that would be cemetery fees, and I think it's all in your packet, and we've already discussed this a couple times. Ganesh, are you coming up on cemetery fees?
There's no changes from last meeting. We did put a note in the file from Board Member Nassif about looking at low-income options for next time around. So that'll be in next year's business plan, if that's okay with the board. But no changes other than that from your last meeting.
And we had a couple of new items that, where we never had a price point on them before, but other than that, no changes. So, Rebecca, would you call the vote? Oh, we need a motion, I'm sorry.
I'll move.
Second.
Rebecca, would you please call the vote?
Davis.
Yes.
Olgo.
Yes.
Facto.
Yes.
Bogus.
Yes.
Massive.
Yes.
Potter.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodard.
Yes.
Vilmain.
Yes.
Homeyer.
Yes.
Pugh.
Yes.
Fanter.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Cemetery fees passed. Let's move on to the receive and file the budget
So Richard
presentation.
Brown will be up with his annual budget presentation. I have some affinity to this because I used to do this presentation when Don Tripp was here, so it's been updated. And also in the back row is Jessica Butler. Some of you have met her. If you raise your hand, Jessica. Jessica is our liaison to the city finance office. She's wonderful. She does a lot of work with us throughout the year, not just one budget presentation. She helps us maintain and watch our budgets and gives us ideas of where we could maybe be more efficient on our budgets sometimes.
Chair Davis, members of the Park and Recreation Board, Richard Brown, Assistant Director. Again, like Ben said, this is our kind of annual orientation of the budget for you as a board, to kind of give you a little bit better understanding about how the Parks and Recreation's budget fits into the overall city budget and what we fight for from a tax dollar standpoint. So what we try to do is kind of start from the very high level. Where do all the tax dollars go in the city of Des Moines? If you have a house, where does every dollar of your tax dollars go? So you can see here things from Broadlawns, the county hospital, to DART, public schools, DMAC, Polk County, as well as a bunch of other little things on the very far right-hand side, all fight for the city tax dollar. But the city of Des Moines gets about 35.49% of that. And that obviously fluctuates a little bit from year to year depending on what each of these entities sets their tax rate at. Next, what we do is kind of walk down into the city's overall budget. The city has about a $738 million budget. That's what it takes to run the city of Des Moines for a year. That's anything from all the revenue that the city gets from collecting trash, to property taxes, to debt that's issued, to do major construction projects. This is what it takes to run the city for an entire year. Tonight, we're talking just about the operating budget, but wanted to take just a second to differentiate between the two. So, I'll go.
I see a lot of you taking notes, so what we'll do is we'll send this to you after the end of the night, or it's first thing tomorrow morning, so you don't have to write all these numbers down, because we'll move through them fast and we can go back. Thank you.
So, operating budget is your day-to-day expenditures. That's what it takes to run the Parks and Recreation Department. It's mainly employee salaries, it's maintenance of the park system, it's the contracts we pay for mowing, it's supplies we purchase, chemicals we buy, pretty much anything that you need to do on a day-to-day operations of the city's Parks and Recreation Department. The capital budget is money we use for major construction projects. These are projects that the city bonds for, that goes out and buys a bond to help pay for the construction of these projects. Basically, if you wanted to look at what we'd use capital improvement bonds for, it would be anything we expect to last 20 plus years. If we expect it to last less than that, the general rule is that that's an operating budget expenditure. So this is your trails, this is new enclosed shelters, this is new playgrounds. It's pretty much any major construction project you think of. And yeah.
Chris, I have a question, Richard. Regarding the allocated funds to the Parks Department, is there a percentage that is required to go to capital budget out of those funds
No.
each year?
No,
Okay,
there's
so it's arbitrary too.
Yeah, so what we do is we work through a process with the finance department, the city manager, and ultimately the city council to prepare a budget for the city every year. And we work through both the operating and what we need for operating needs every year, as well as then we put together a 5-year CIP budget that helps us kind of project what projects we see coming forward, what potential grants we have, and what donations we're able to work with different partners on. I don't expect you to read this sheet, like Ben said, we'll hand it out, but just wanted to show you how does Parks and Recreation fit into the overall budget of the city departments and how the city operates. You know, anything from finance to public works to police, fire, the library, a lot of the things you don't see, such as human resources, information technology, and civil and human rights, and then ultimately the mayor and council. Everything's broken down into a budget, where they get their funds, and how they spend it. We also just want to talk you briefly through what are some of the historical budget changes that we've had. And over the last 10 years, we've experienced major changes in how we operate, the number of staff we have. We've looked at things such as increasing revenues. We worked with you as a board to set fees and charges for a lot of our events and the services we provide. We've seen a shift in priorities. We've seen a lot more emphasis on trails and natural resources and some of the programming we do. We look for efficiencies in our operation. We've reduced our operating budgets by quite a bit over the time. We've reduced the number of staff over the previous years compared to what we used to have. And we've contracted quite a few operations. If you're new to the board, one of the things that we used to do in-house was mow all the parks and cemeteries and trails. And now a majority of that work is contracted out to companies that bid on it every 3 years to come and do that services for the park system. This is just to give you a flavor of what the budgets have looked like since 2012. So blue is what the taxpayers subsidize for the park and recreation system to operate and manage that. Green is our revenue. So you can see back in fiscal year 2012, we were just short of about $16 million operating budget to operate the entire parks and recreation system. The one thing I do want to point out, we didn't actually get cut that much in 2017. What that is in fiscal year 2017, the city manager pulled the facilities, so that would be management, all the municipal buildings like City Hall, the Armory, as well as all other city-owned buildings, and the trade staff that went with them, all the carpenters, electricians, painters, pulled them out into a different department now called facilities management. So the money that was in our budget for those staff members now is moved over to the city manager office budget, so that's what reflects the big jump from 16 to 17. So we didn't get our budget cut that year, but just wanted to explain that a little bit more. Also, like I talked about earlier, we've come to you a lot for finding ways to increase revenues. One of the most important things that Ben has talked about is finding ways to make sure that we can bring as much revenue as we can, but not being overly burdensome that people don't participate in our projects, our processes, our programs, you name it. We have to make sure that we pay attention to the demographics that make raising additional revenues a challenge. We understand as a Parks and Recreation agency that we're not in the business to make money or break even or even make a profit, but we need to make sure that we can bring as much revenue as possible while looking at and providing the services that everyone can participate in. Some of the areas of success that we've been able to achieve are we now are able to charge parking fees to all the people that come from out of town that use our soccer facilities. All the teams prepay their parking fees as part of the tournaments that come to town. We're able to charge fees as part of the state soccer tournaments that come here. And then we work diligently with the Cemetery Advisory Committee as well as you, the Parks and Recreation Board, to set cemetery fees that are appropriate for the market that we're in. Again, just a summary of some major actions that we've taken in the last 10 plus years. One of the things that we're very proud of is we've been able to maintain the majority of services provided by the department with a lot of changes that have happened. Examples are we've outsourced mowing and custodial services. We've worked very hard with new nonprofits that operate both the zoo and the botanical centers, our botanical gardens. We've had major departmental reorganizations, how we've looked at the services we provide, and we've reduced pool and aquatic center operating hours, but tried to minimize the impacts to people that use them. We've worked to outsource the golf operations to a private contractor, so we work with C Corporation now to manage all 3 of our golf courses. And then we've eliminated some full-time positions over that time to make sure that we can still try to meet our budget targets as well as providing those services. So now we're looking at what is our current operating budget. We're now at a budget of about $13 million. We bring in just short of $4 million in revenue. So the taxpayers subsidize Parks and Recreation by about $9 million each year. And what we do, and I'll walk you through this, but we break that down into service lines. And service lines aren't an exact science on how we spend all this money, but what we try to do is break it down into buckets that make the most sense. And they are aquatics, city landscape support, cemeteries, civic attractions, community centers, parks, recreation, and trails. Now, as we start to jump into our budget a little bit more, you can kind of see from a percentage standpoint of each of those service lines that take up the most. Obviously, cemeteries, parks, and recreation are some of the biggest things, followed by aquatics, trails, civic attractions, and there's some other ones that don't necessarily sound like they make a lot of sense, but once we get to each one of those service lines, they'll make a little bit more sense. Again, here, just looking at how the adopted budget lines up with revenues for these service lines. So you can see here, cemeteries bring in the biggest proportion of our revenues. They are by far, out of pretty much everything, at 35% of the biggest revenues we bring in, and yet that's still an operation that is subsidized despite all the revenue that comes in. I won't make you read all this here, but basically this is just a little bit more detailed information about each one of these service lines. It talks about what the service line is, what's the overall budget, subsidy, and revenue, and then it gives a brief description of everything that's covered within that area. And we'll walk through those all in the coming pages here. The first one is aquatics. So this is really everything that governs the management of aquatic facilities for the Parks and Recreation system. It's our 2 pools, our 3 aquatic centers, all the splash pools, spray grounds, wading pools, as well as our swimming lessons. And you can see here in the bottom right, it's about a $1.6 million budget, and we bring in just short of $500,000 in revenue. And revenue from that comes from people, fees they pay for swimming lessons, to all the revenue that comes in from daily admissions at our pool and aquatic centers. Next is city landscape support. So this is a little bit different, but this is things such as our greenhouse. We grow several 100,000 annuals and perennials every year that beautify the city. This can be anything from downtown. We provide the plants for Fleur Drive for Des Moines Waterworks to plant, and hundreds of thousands of annuals that go all over public spaces in neighborhood associations, in our parks, you name it. They're what beautify the city every year. Also, it's talking about things such as non-park land management. This is litter control. It could be plantings outside of parks. It could be snow removal on the streets. We have a partnership with the Public Works Department where our staff goes over there to help ensure that the streets are plowed in a timely manner. Again, expenses about $1.2 million, a lot less revenue on something like this. There's not a lot of revenue to be made in city landscape support, so we subsidize that pretty heavily. Next one, cemeteries. 7 cemeteries across the city. That includes the managing of lot and niche sales. And we do on average about 600 to 650 burial services annually. That obviously changes from year to year. So about $1.8 million in expenses, but bringing in about $1.3 million in revenue. So that accounts for, like we said, a third of all the revenues we bring in as a department. Next one is civic attractions. This is the management of the long-term operating agreements for the regional facilities. So these are the nonprofits or contractors that we work with to manage the facilities you see here. It's Little Blank Park Zoo, it's all 3 of our golf courses, it's Principal Park, as well as the Botanical Center. Again, about $600,000 in expenses, but we do bring in quite a bit of revenue. This could be the lease for Principal Park from the Iowa Cubs. This is money we receive from the golf course operator that is paid to us annually, as well as any other miscellaneous revenue that comes in as part of those contracts. Next one is our community recreation centers. This is our 2 centers that we have across the city. One, 4 Mile on the east side and Pioneer Columbus on the south side. These are great facilities that are really a hub of activity year round, from anything from Polk County senior meal sites that are there 24/7, 365 pretty much. We have preschool activities, after school activities, drop-ins, holiday recreation. We do special events. November all the way through February, there are just tons of kids running around in our basketball programs. We have day activities. They're incredible opportunities for people to get out and really experience opportunities in our city. And as well as there's opportunities to rent for birthday parties or fitness classes, you name it. But about $600,000 in expenses. Again, not a lot of revenue. And this kind of talks towards what we've talked about with our demographic. They're very, very affordable. You can get in for $1. And it's a very affordable price. You get in, you can have gym use, whatever activities we have there. There's pool tables, ping pong tables, weights, you name it, fitness equipment. So really a great opportunity for people to have an affordable space to use in our city. Next one, this is a majority of the costs that we have here, but it's managing your park system. It's mowing and maintaining, it's natural resource management, it's looking at green infrastructure and conservation practices, it's plantings and trees, irrigations along some of our boulevards, it's the constant pickup of litter throughout the park system, custodial services, community garden, and Grays Lake Park. We just want to point out that major park like that is filled in here as well. Again, this is an area that doesn't generate a lot of revenue, but you do see some. It could be from space rentals to rebates. Sometimes we get on things, a lot of miscellaneous things that come into this. The second biggest one is our recreation. This is all our adult and youth sports, special events, environmental education. This is shelter rentals, so all the shelter rentals we do across the system, disc golf courses, it's cyclocross rentals that we have, and all the field space we rent out for sports, about $2.6 million in expenses. And we do bring in quite a bit of revenue here. Just Ding Darling Shelter alone brings about $30,000 in revenue from shelter rentals there a year. So very, very popular, and they do bring in quite a bit of revenue. Trails, this is our 81 miles of paved trails and nature trail through the system. We see millions of uses per year across this system. Expenses go to managing and maintaining mowing, litter control, any sort of plantings or tree trimming, as well as snow removal. That was a policy that was adopted that isn't actually something that's adopted across the entire metro area, but we do remove all the snow from our paved trails every time after it snows to reflect the amount of use that we get on our trail system pretty much all year long. Expenses of about $750,000 there. Very little revenue related to that, mostly probably from events that happen and people that use the trail system. So this was an exercise that Rebecca sent out to you, the board. We got everyone turned this back in, but we wanted to see how your priorities for budgeting along these service lines would reflect the actual budgeting that I presented here today. So I just want to point out the red line is what our adopted budget is, and the blue line is all your responses averaged out. So we took and developed that on $100, how you would spend all that, and so we broke our budget up that way, and so you can kind of see that they very much mirror how we actually budget. So it's kind of interesting to see that. So we do have a few proposed budget adjustments here, so I just want to walk through these with you real quick. One of the things that has been recommended is that in order to reduce the budget a little bit, we would change Grays Lake's hours. So what we're proposing here is that Grays Lake would be closed from 10 p.m. to midnight, so 2 hours at the very end of the night, April through October. That would allow us to reduce those 2 hours of staff time through April all the way through October and save about $20,000 annually. We see that's probably the lowest time of the year that the park is actually used, those last 2 hours of the night, and think that it's a pretty easy savings without impacting a predominant amount of use for the park. A second one is to look at Grays Lake concession stand. This isn't a budget cut, but this is a potential revenue enhancement. So what we're proposing to do is send out our current concessions operations. So right now we do pops, candy bars, chips, all kind of packaged food, as well as then our rental facility with our boats, our kayaks, our paddle boats, canoes, you name it. Put that out to an RFP similar to what we did at Berlin Marina with Captain Roy's, and see if there's a potential to increase the amount of revenue we see there. So something that we're working to develop, and we can see if that's something that might result in a revenue enhancement and increased service at Grays Lake. And finally, the last one is the proposal to close the remaining traditional wading pools that we have as of the 2020 season. So not next year, but the following year. So we believe at that point we should have 8 of those facilities left, and would result in about a $20,000 operating budget savings per year once those were all closed. That would reduce the amount of service that people have from an aquatics facility standpoint. The goal is still to eventually place all those with our spray grounds, but budgets have not allowed those to be replaced in a way that would keep up with this if this was accepted by the city council.
Just to clarify, staff didn't go looking to cut. Every department was asked by the city manager's office to come up with some reductions for this year because there's a deficit they're trying to solve.
I have when we were at our executive meeting, we talked about the traditional wading pool closures and how there is, now those wading pools are the traditional ones that are filled up, every day. Usually they have to have a park supervisor there, and then they're drained every night. But it just so happens, I think we're talking about 10 or 8 of those pools.
Yeah, by the time that would take effect, we think there'll be 8 based on our current construction schedule.
Those just happen to be in the most suppressed areas economically in Des Moines. And I think that I would like to have us take an additional look at that, because the savings is 25,000.
Roughly in that neighborhood, yeah.
The savings, I wonder if the savings justifies the service that would be not there anymore. So I would appreciate, and maybe we can have board discussion on this, but to take a look at that, especially since we don't have any spray grounds coming into the future. I think our last spray ground budget is in 2019. Am I correct, Ben? And there's nothing going on beyond that. So basically, for $20,000 a year, we're closing those pools, and I think that's an area that could be hit pretty hard with young kids.
Thanks for bringing that up, George. That's my exact question, which eight wading pools are this gonna be? And is there a way we can get something put in the capital budget to get spray grounds put in those areas faster if we're looking to cut some services that they need?
Let me answer that real quick. So absolutely, you are an advisory board. So one of the things you could do is write a letter to the city manager and tell him how you feel about this, and ask, you could come to your next executive committee meeting, and he came to the last one. He was very good about that. And you could tell him where you'd like to be, and you could then decide what your next step is after you meet with him. The 2 cuts, because one's a revenue enhancement, and we can't forecast what that would be, but the 2 cuts are about $50-some thousand. I'm just rounding off to the nearest numbers here. There's going to be 8 left. We can send you a map tomorrow. We have a map of these things based on wards, and it's not perfect science. We don't have a reason why some wards have more wading pools, traditional ones, because they were built many, many decades ago. But it does affect some wards more than it affects the other wards too. So there's some issues. Nothing's ever perfect as far as making reductions, but this is one of the things that we felt like of cutting this versus something else. Everything we do touches some level of poverty in our community, and we don't like that to begin with, but this is one area we thought we could propose.
So you said that we can, you said correspond with the city manager?
I'd say that would be my recommendation. You would pull together a letter that you'd all feel good about and share it with him in the near future, because these budgets are moving forward.
Right. Would the board collectively be able to write a letter? Thank you for bringing that up, both of you, because I feel like after this Live DSM, which sounded great, and talking about equity, and then this, what we're just talking about, they're not matching up, and that's really disappointing.
How much were you asked to cut from the budget? What's your, is it 50,000? Is that the number?
The number, this year there wasn't a true number for, he asked for ideas. So staff came up with a small list. As you know, we don't have a lot of things left that aren't going to affect large numbers.
Here's my concern, and if you look at this in the big picture, if you go back to 2007, you know, the operating budget was over $19 million. And so right now, if you look at the economy, it is about as good as it's ever going to get. And I've been here, a lot of you have been here through some of these budget cycles where the downturns have been more severe. And Park and Rec is the first one on the chopping block. It just happens every time. 2007, we had 145 employees. Park and Rec's down to 58. I remember a couple years back, it was last year, we fought hard to claw back one planning position. And I'm increasingly uncomfortable with this idea that this board is just going to say, here's your choices. You need to cut $50,000 out of this budget. And then the Park and Rec board comes in, rubber stamps it, and says this is okay to do it. I would like this board to send a unanimous signal to the city council. Now, ultimately, they're going to make these decisions. We're just a recommendation. But I don't understand why we continue to accept these cuts in the budget. And so we look at reducing services, closing, reducing the hours at Grays Lake at the same time. We're going to do all these enhancements at that park. Closing wading pools. One of the presentations you gave, one of the ways you've dealt with reduced budget is to reduce the aquatic hours. I'd like to know how much money it would cost to restore our aquatic pool hours to a more traditional schedule. And I'm thinking more along the lines that instead of just sending a letter and raising concerns, that we reject this budget and vote and approve a budget that includes funding for Grays Lake park hours, to keep the wading pools open and restore our aquatic pool hours. Now, we're not talking a huge sum of money. It's maybe a couple $100,000. It's, again, we're just recommendations to the city council, but maybe it's time that we kind of send a signal to the city council that maybe they should stop and think here before they continue to cut Park and Rec. So whether we receive and file stage, maybe that's something that can be discussed more with the executive committee amongst the board members. But I'm wondering if we just do a disservice if we come back and rubber stamp and approve a budget that cuts services. And that, you know, it's the city manager's, city council's office to make those tough political decisions. But as advocates for Park and Rec system, are we really doing our job if we just vote for a reduction? And maybe we should collectively send a signal and reject this budget and approve one that includes, doesn't include the $50,000 in cuts that have been articulated, but also includes additional monies to restore the aquatic pools to their regular hours. Something to think about.
I hear what you're saying, and what we can do is we can discuss this more in depth at the executive meeting, and I would invite everyone there to come and give their opinion. As an overview, Lloyd, as to what you're saying here, I think going into the fiscal year 2019, this is really a pretty good budget for us not to be hit, because I think you're right when you said these are the best of economic times that we're going to have, and it's probably going to go downhill from here, if I'm paraphrasing correctly. I think we come out of this pretty well with those, you know, the hour cuts at Grays Lake. That doesn't really impact much of anything. The concession stand, hopefully they'll get something that will be like the one that they have down on the river. Hopefully that'll be an increase. The only thing that really hits us is the traditional wading pool for $20,000 savings, or if we inflate it to $25,000. I think that that's something that can be fixed, but I don't think, I think that we need to discuss this more, and I would certainly welcome everyone to be there, and let's discuss this as to what avenue. But I think we have to go fairly quick because this budget is in the process of being adapted, and so I think that that would be the best way to do it.
Got a
Comments,
question.
Heather?
Yeah, I would push back a little bit on the hours, just because we have residents who work different work schedules and non-traditional, maybe work 3 jobs, 2 jobs, different times, and that might be a time when they can go down and walk.
I just want to remind folks that the trail system, not that I want to point out a loophole on TV, but the trail system is open 24/7, 365, because by ordinance, it's part of the city's transportation system. So if Gray's Lake closes, what happens? The parking lots close, the beach closes, the terrace building and concession operations and restrooms close under this proposal. But those that wanted to simply just walk on the actual trail would still be allowed anywhere in all of
So
our
they can
trails.
walk around.
So they could still walk. Lights might not be on as part of that, but
Where would they park?
what's that?
Where would they park?
They would have to park anywhere that's open to them to park that's not under our jurisdiction.
Okay.
Because parks, you have a few parks, the Riverwalk, Grays Lake were 2 examples, that have hours that are different from the vast majority of parks. The vast majority of parks close 1/2 hour after sunset by ordinance. Things you all have advice on and recommendation powers on. I would say you have to remember too, you're gonna have an opportunity to, if the process has been the same as it has been in my 11 years working here, there'll be a public budget, I don't know this for a fact, but there's past been public budget input sessions where you're invited to. You all are appointed by at least 1 city council member on there. You can talk to your council member, you can talk to the city manager, he's good to come to our meetings. So you have all these abilities. I just want to give you your opportunities and outline the process for you. The city won't adopt a budget likely, again, this is the last information I've had and going off experience, until we have to, which usually means the last meeting in February, because the state of Iowa requires all cities in Iowa to adopt a budget before March 15th. That means there is time to have these discussions.
So we're just asked to
Receiving
receive and
it.
file.
Beg your
tonight.
pardon?
Tonight?
Tonight, we're just receiving and filing, yes.
So we know we can have more conversation
Right, but I
regarding
wanted to
this at the
emphasize-
exec committee.
But I wanted to emphasize that we come to this executive meeting, it's at 7:30, and I realize that's an inconvenience for some, but come and let's get our heads together on this and see which way we want to go. And Lloyd, you do bring up great ideas about the pools, because we have pretty Spartan pool hours now in Des Moines, but, I don't see monies coming in. So this is something that, and I think Ben alluded to this, is talk with your city council person that appointed you. I mean, obviously, they appointed you in good faith, so talk with them and give them your feelings rather than en masse we say something. Bill, you had a comment?
I got a couple things. If we're going to, kind of look at pool hours and the waiting pools, I'd like to have information that would allow us to kind of drill down, see, how much usage there is of those facilities. I mean, I'm assuming that Ben and you didn't just decide on these waiting pools. I mean, they're not like the spray grounds. I assume they don't get the same usage.
The unfortunate thing for us when it comes to spray grounds and traditional wading pools is traditional wading pools has staff that are required by state law. So I can count those folks. At spray grounds, I don't have a good way to count them. We have nobody there.
Right.
We're just gonna
right.
go off the eye test and driving by and then seeing wear and tear.
Okay.
And so,
But just in general.
but in
you
general,
do
spray grounds
you
have twice
you
the length of season because we can open them up as soon as April 15th and keep them up until, sometimes October 15th, whereas spray grounds, because of staff, are 90 days.
But you do have some idea as far as usage of the waiting pools and
We do.
usage during the hours that we've cut as far as the pools. I mean, we can,
Yes.
okay.
Just
So
to be clarified, a couple things.
Let me finish.
Yeah, sure, sorry.
He's the one.
And I guess I wonder how temporary this might be in view of if the local option sales tax goes through, I know
Is
that's
what now?
local option sales tax. If that goes through, are they still looking at March to try to,
That's my understanding.
I mean, could that change this whole conversation? Ben?
I believe that would be an opportunity of discussion. I can't commit on city resources as
No,
a
no,
whole,
I
but I think
realize,
you
but
have,
I mean-
yes, I think that could be a a discussion that city manager would have with you.
Just, but remember, March is the certification date on the budget, so it has to be in place by then.
Right, but at least, we're talking maybe a one-year fix is what I'm,
Well,
that's what I'm
and-
hoping.
And to be clear on this, the wading pools are going to be open through next summer, correct?
So under this proposal, they would have one more calendar year left, starting January of 1st of 19.
Okay.
So whenever we open wading
Okay.
pools, let's say it's April-ish, I'm sorry, let's say wading pools open in June, they'd be open for those summer months.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So we're really talking,
Yeah, but we have to act now on this, to pull
understand.
this. Any other comments, Lloyd?
Well, I just want to follow up, Ben, the request that you would be able to pull for us the dollar amount of what it would take to restore the pools to their traditional hours as well as some.
And you're
kind of-
talking about the 5 pools,
Yeah,
large
aquatic.
pools, yep.
And then can you, with that, some type of estimate of usage? Or you're able to project?
So what we did, just a quick history, is when we had those cuts, maybe 2009, don't quote me, but we came together because we had a larger target by the budget deficit. And we sat down and we had 3 public meetings. Again, not to perfectly answer Lloyd's question, but we went out to 3 different parts of the community and said, hey, we can have a library model where one library is open, one pool's open this day, next pool's open this day, or we can look at different hours for different pools, or we can look at one set of hours that's uniform. The public told us pick the uniform hours across all 5 pools. So I have some old data that could tell me what those pools were like during that hour, but I can tell you the public said if you were going to cut hours, cut them in the evening instead of during the middle of the day or later starting of the day.
Sure.
That's what we did last time. That's an old report, but I can dig that up, hopefully. That helps.
Joel?
I've got a question about the revenue enhancement and historically looking at Birdland or Captain Roy's. How much of an increase in revenue did Captain Roy's bring in versus when we ran the concession?
So it's only been 1 year, so we don't have a great data at this point. And these things are more economic development than they are making the city rich. Remember, those facilities today, before they were Captain Roy's, well, this will be a little different. I'll tell you this number in a second. Captain Roy's was an old metal building, so it's not a perfect example. It was storage. And we no longer needed it because the building you're sitting in was now the new central function of Parks and Recreation. So that's usually a sliding scale in less than 10%, like HubSpot, Captain Roy's. We get 10%. I'm just giving you averages of all these operations of gross revenues after they've paid that's the revenue, then they get their expenses. Now today, Gray's Lake concession stand. We're not fancy there on purpose because we just don't have the ability to be fancy. We can clear around $30,000 a year with watercraft rentals at $5 per half hour and prepackaged foods, no alcohol but pop, water, candy, chips, etc. So we believe, after what we've seen in other areas, that with the right ordinances in place and the right purview by the park board that approve things, but let's just say there was limited alcohol sales and higher end foods and higher end services, there's a chance that Gray's Lake, being Gray's Lake with its 1 million visits per year, is going to have a lot of people be interested in giving us a higher return that you'd see. That's the thinking behind this. So we wouldn't, like I told the city manager, we'll put an RFP out, but we're not going to do anything less than our baseline of $30,000 per year unless we think it's very close and they can offer a higher and better service. So I just gave a clue to all the bidders, unfortunately, but that's where we need to be. We're not going to do this just to break even.
And most of the revenue comes from rented watercraft.
Yes.
So, any other comments? Motion?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, I think next is the Fall Family Fun Fest.
What a great event. Matt and his team from the Recreation Department did a great job. He's going to give you a brief overview. We're almost done, so thank you for the extra time you've allotted.
Chair Davis, members of the Park and Recreation Board, Matt Kalsevich, Recreation Manager. As Ben mentioned, just a quick review of our inaugural Fall Family Fun Fest. We gave you some initial information about this in our fall programs preview, so we certainly wanted to come back and talk about the successes of the event this first time out. We hosted things on Saturday, October 13th, and again, first time offering. We used some resources from some other events that had run their course and combined them to provide this new opportunity. We hosted the event primarily at Union Park and also at Captain Roy's. I want to take this opportunity to recognize some of our fantastic sponsors. Taco John's and Hy-Vee were instrumental in helping us execute on our first ever food eating competition. Fire and police had an interaction and were integrated into activities throughout the day. The Des Moines Music Coalition partnered with us for our youth music showcase, and obviously Captain Roy's and their provision of the facility, as well as their promotion of the event to their population and their followers, especially on social media. So talking specifically about our first ever food eating competition provided through Des Moines Park and Recreation, again hosted the event at Captain Roy's. The original vision was to have it be outside on their pontoon stage looking out at the river, but it was a little cold that day, and those are things that are just factors in any program outside this time of year. So we moved inside, but again it was a perfect setting. We had 3 competitions: tacos and potato olays provided by our partners from Taco John's, and then pumpkin pie provided by our partner at Hy-Vee. So we had prize packets for the champions. We had gift certificates from our sponsors, as well as some Park and Rec specific gift certificates for golf, Grace Lake, rentals and different things that would help them burn off these calories they were consuming during the event, so get them active afterward. But as far as the creation of this new event was concerned, we ended up deciding to go with picnic style rules. So a lot of you have seen some of these competitive professional food eating competitions where there's just kind of a mass consumption happening. The picnic style rule format really allows the food to be consumed as it was intended. So there was a real element of having to actually eat the food as opposed to do anything else. And I think it was the right choice for our competition. So each of the 3 competitions was 6 minutes in length, and that'll give you a little perspective here on our next slide, highlighting our first ever food eating champions. On the left, Alex Ward ate 7 tacos in that 6-minute time. In the middle, Matt Ritter ate 1.5 pounds of potato olays. And Joe Van Hollen of Des Moines Fire ate 3 pieces of pumpkin pie. So I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but again, that just eating of it and the difficulty when you're actually in a competition setting to eat it quickly is maybe a little tougher than people anticipated. So
You say this, Matt, amateurs.
well, you know what? We've got plenty of room and opportunity for people to come in and try this again next time around, because it went that well that we're certainly going to offer it again, and we were excited about.
Spokesperson from the park board, maybe?
There you go. We can have celebrity participants, and that's definitely something we'll make room for. So again, thanks to Ben and members of our team for exploring a new opportunity like this. It was definitely unique and exciting and fun, and I think people who were there enjoyed the spectacle of it, and that was certainly part of what we were going for. Next, at 1 p.m. that day, we went with our youth music showcase, and again, Captain Roy's as the host location. Obviously, that's become a professional music venue here in the community, where we have a lot of local music talent who are paid to perform. And this was just a great opportunity to integrate the youth into what's become, obviously, a tremendous new venue in the community. Our partnership with the Des Moines Music Coalition, this was just a very logical expansion of what we do in our summer program. And they jumped in with promotion and provided the equipment that we used for our backline. And so certainly we're a great partner here to make this happen in our first iteration. The performers there, you can see the lineup. I think it reads pretty well. We'll show you some pictures of our youth performers here, equally divided. There in the middle was our only true band. But we had a pair of duets come up next with Plumero and the Hobo Squirrels, and then a few soloists at the end, Jolie Seitz and Cold Saint. This was performers only from 12 to 18 years of age, but I'll tell you, the quality and caliber of what they shared with us on this day was outstanding, and I think the youth music community is very well represented here in Des Moines for many years to come. Again, an event that went so well, we will certainly offer this again in some form or fashion. And we may not have to wait all the way until next fall. The team at Captain Roy's was so pleased with what we offered here, we might have something happen in the spring, and we're talking about that concept right now. And last but not least was our evening event up in Union Park from 5 to 7 p.m. Throughout the course of that time, we estimated about 500 people in attendance, so a really great turnout for a first-time offering. You see the various things that we had to engage people during the evening portion. Pumpkin carving contest, we had 12 entries, of which were very high caliber, and you'll see one example, I believe our ultimate winner on a slide I have coming up. We also had inflatables, which is a tremendous attraction for kids. We had an obstacle course and a slide that were busy the entire time we were there. That was in addition to the rocket slide and the regular playground that's there as part of Union Park. Police SWAT vehicle was on site, and the police dog, again, appreciate their contribution. Same with fire, who brought out a truck and actually helped run our s'mores station and did some fire education as well. This lined up perfectly with the end of Fire Prevention Week, so appreciated that support from our internal city counterparts. We had some family activities where we did some environmental education regarding animals and wildlife they might see around the park, and we handed out some candy at that time as well. Not on the list, we also had a face painter. That line was pretty long the entire time. Again, a very popular feature for any family event that we run. And then we had the Heritage Carousel open, and that was free from 5 to 7 o'clock, again, during the time of our event. They had an estimated 650 riders, so a wonderful addition to the services and opportunities we provided during that night. The one casualty of the weather during that week was we did not get the chance to show an outdoor movie. We had originally hoped that we would be able to do that as part of our offering that night, but because of the rain and wet turf of the park, and then the delicate nature of some of our equipment, the temperature that was projected for that evening, we had to make a call on Friday afternoon about providing the movie or not, and we erred on the side of caution there. So be part of the concept in the future and hope to actually provide it when we run this event again, but had to make that difficult decision this time around. But I'll leave you with this collage and some images of a lot of what I just described we had at the event, at least the night portion there. You can see that pumpkin down at the bottom. That was somebody pretty talented bringing that to our event, so we appreciated them sharing that with us. Again, very successful first offering and something we will continue in the future, and I certainly just want to thank everybody here and members of our team who took a chance on this as a first-time event, and just so pleased personally that it was so well received, and certainly excited about what it could evolve into in the future.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. Questions?
Good job, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We had a lot of fun putting it on. Appreciate your support.
We'll go to, well, actually, due to the lateness, we can, unless someone has something pressing on boards and commissions, we can catch that next meeting. Rex, I want to thank you for coming and being part of the presentation tonight. You're always involved. We appreciate that. Another announcement is Jim Ballard has been appointed by Councilman Gatto to replace Mark Godwin on the board. And so he'll be here at the next meeting. Sam Pugh was just reappointed, so that was a good thing. Anything else that I'm missing? Joel, you look like am I missing something?
No. Our next cemetery board meeting is November 7th.
Okay, all right. And then, once again, regarding that, everyone had good points that they brought up, many points. So come to the executive board meeting in November if you can, and we can further our comments along with Lloyd. And Lloyd, I certainly hope you can be there.
What date's that?
November 14th,
7:30.
a.m., lower level conference room here.
Anything else? Well, with that being said, Andrea?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you.